Hey everyone, welcome to Global Voices. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. We have many special Global Voices in the past, and we have some in the future, but this is the one that to me has really stood out. And I'm especially thankful we have people from the community that are here. We often are able to have people who are employees and parts of campus outside of Beeson, and that's been great. Of course, we have Beeson students, but we don't have as many people from the community as normal, and I just wanted you to know you're welcome. We're just really grateful that you're here. My name is David Parks. I'm the director of the Global Center. The Global Center does Global Voices, this series. It's a weekly series, almost every week. And I would love for you, if you are interested in learning more about what we do, we have these flyers. You can grab one on the way out. One event that you might be interested in that's coming up pretty soon. Today, we're opening sign up for the next big one for this semester, and that will be about Martha Myers. Many of you may be like me. You've seen, you know about her. You've seen her statue on the second floor in the library, but you want to know more. And so what we did is we asked the Purtles, who were missionaries with her in Yemen, to come and share about her. Tell us more about this woman who influenced so many people here on this campus and across the state as well, and just did an amazing work for Christ. And she herself was martyred in Yemen about 15 or 16 years ago. So again, today you can go on our website, beesondivinity.com/global voices, and sign up for that if you're interested. We also have, as part of our Go Global Week, our Missions Emphasis Week coming up in a couple of weeks, Paul Borthwick. He is a leader in missions, a leader for missions mobilization in particular, teaches at Gordon Conwell Seminary. He will be preaching in chapel in 2 weeks, and he'll be talking about missions and prayer. We'd love to have you join us in chapel. If you're interested in this, would like a little more information, we also have some brochures. They give you a kind of an overview of what we do in the Global Center as well, but you'll see that prominently in there. Also, if anyone here, if you're on social media, please give us a follow. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. BDS, Beeson Divinity School, Global Center, and this way we can kind of keep you up to date with the things that we do and give you some inspiration for missions as well. I want to draw attention to a couple people who are here. David and Candace with the WMU Foundation. Raise your hands. They're the ones you thank for your lunch today. All right. So we appreciate their sponsorship. They've been partners of ours for several events. We really appreciate them here with the Global Center. There's going to be, just so you know, there will be a previewing of this documentary. You know, today we're not going to be watching the whole thing, of course, but there will be a previewing, a showing here on campus November the 10th at 7 p.m. in the Brock Forum. This is part of Homecoming Week. So we're hopeful that there will be people who are back on campus for Homecoming, who, of course, like me, remember Dr. Cowley. I have the privilege of knowing Audrey Cowley when I was a student here in undergrad, but I had him for a couple courses. Very much appreciated my time with him. And so I think there will be some people that want to join that. Again, November 10th, Thursday night, 7 p.m. in the Brock Forum. I am pleased today to present Bill and Audrey Cowley, Cliff Vaughn. Raise your hand, Cliff. He's back there. He's the filmmaker. He works with Ethics Daily. They've produced this documentary. I'm going to let them introduce more background about themselves, and we are just going to go ahead and get started.
Beverly Newth teaches language arts at Hillcrest. She and Carl Eisman are also assistant house parents at Elm House, an off-campus hostel for Lutheran missionary kids. She writes home September 27th. The trouble within the country is far from settled, and most of the people feel something may blow up on Saturday.
We were told that we should keep the kids, the hostel students, close to the hostel and not let them go into Jos, to the markets or anything on that weekend.
Wednesday, September 28th. Harry Bohr, principal of the Theological College of Northern Nigeria, near Jos, is restless. He drives 10 miles to Jos to visit Edgar Smith. Edgar and Nell Smith are well connected and longtime missionaries in Nigeria. Bohr hopes Smith can reassure him. Smith cannot. As Bohr heads back to TCNN, 2 soldiers tell him, "Go back to your school and stay there. Tomorrow, there will be big trouble." Students meet Bohr on his arrival back at campus. Afraid for what is to come, they suggest that Bohr turn off the floodlights illuminating the college's distinctive chapel tower. Bohr tells them not to fear, saying, "Receive anyone who might come to us for refuge. Therefore, the chapel tower must remain lit." Jos, later that evening.
The phone rang, picked it up. The first words we heard was, "It has started." And we knew immediately what it was, that the rumors were now fulfilled.
On the other end of the line, Archie and Margaret Dunaway, house parents at the Baptist Hostel for Hillcrest.
So we knew it had started.
And we listened out the windows. We could hear dogs barking and screaming.
And I looked out the window and I saw the mob. But anytime this mob would think that there was an Igbo or it was called out, it was somebody from the south, they would chase after them. And then you'd hear the whacking. I'm gonna cry. Yeah. We knew they were being beaten in the grass.
Audrey and I were discussing this throughout the night. What could we do? What should we do? We had a few students and a few teachers who were of Eastern origin. What could we do? And the plan we came to was to bring them to the compound where we lived, which was about a mile from the school.
Well, we were a little concerned about Garba.
He had been working with us for a number of years, but he was of Northern origin. I told him, you know, we cannot bring them here unless I have your word that you will protect them as we are protecting them. And he didn't answer immediately. He went off to think about it for a little while. He came back. He said, "I won't do it for them, but I'll do it for you." I knew him well enough to know that he was a person of honor. On that compound, there was an empty house. The person who ordinarily occupied it was on furlough at the time.
And he brought them over and put them in the little house that we had. We closed up all the windows and made it look like it was still vacant. Ooh, lovely. Thank everyone for coming.
Good afternoon. Thank each of you for being here. It means so much to me personally to see the turnout today. My name is Cliff Vaughn. I'm one of the filmmakers behind The Disturbances, which you've seen 4 minutes of it. The whole film is 75 minutes, and it chronicles how Christian missionaries and Nigerian pastors helped save lives in Nigeria in 1966 in the middle of a tribal genocide. I'm going to be sort of playing the interviewer today and asking some questions of the coolies. Some of them I know the answer to or think I know the answer to, and some of them will be news to me. And so it's important.
Surprise you.
I've learned try to not to be surprised in a wonderful way.
Could we?
Yes, and with us today are Bill and Audrey Cowley, who were missionaries. We're going to talk more about their missionary service and show photos. And I know Bill wants to say something.
First of all, I'd like to ask that the members of our family who are here, if you would just stand up and let people see you, because some of them were there at the same time, of course, we were. And we're especially privileged to have several persons who are Nigerian. Some of them are citizens of the U.S., but many of them may not yet be. So if you are one of the Nigerians here. Would you stand up, please? Now, beyond these, if you have ever been to Nigeria, would you stand up? Okay.
Well, the first question is, tell us how you became missionaries in Nigeria, when you went and how long you served.
You want to start?
Go ahead.
Well, to make a very long story mercifully short, both Audrey and I were mission volunteers. I think I was a mission volunteer from teenage times. And so planning education, planning what to do was always a path to missions. I didn't know where. I think Audrey had something of the same experience, and we came together at the University of Florida, where I was in graduate school and she was a campus minister. And so we met there, and in due course we revealed our secret that we were mission volunteers, and as they say, from that point on, it was history.
And you went to Nigeria in which year?
1955, we went to Nigeria. The reason for Nigeria was that independence was coming within 5 years in Nigeria. There was a move to have as many schools as possible, and so they knew that we were educators. I had at that time something that I think no longer exists. I had a life teaching certificate. And so we moved into that. We hadn't really thought specifically about Nigeria up to that point. And so we went, and we taught in one of the schools down on the coast for our first tour in Nigeria, but then the second tour we went back with the mandate to found a school, a secondary school in northern Nigeria, which is the heavily Muslim part of the country, and we had no school there. So that's sort of the basic part of it.
In research on screen, you see the covers of your missionary applications, which I don't know that y'all have actually seen in a long time, but here they are from 1955. And then you wind up in Jos, Nigeria. Tell people a little bit about Jos. Here's a photo of Jos from the 1960s.
Jos was on a plateau, or is on a plateau. It's cooler there than any place else around, so it's where people come on vacation. We enjoyed being there very much, and when we reached the place, when we came back from furlough and came out to Jos, we saw that the First Baptist Church of Jos had already started doing things to speed up the process. But sometimes the things that speed up the process make the process a little difficult. So we found there were two houses that Bill and Bob Parham found that were not too far from the designated area for the school, and that's where we went to live. The first year that our school was in process, we met in a stable. That was all that was available to us at that point. No buildings on the actual compound, but the stable was close to where we lived, and it worked out fine. And the second year we were in the buildings. for the actual school.
We have a couple of more photos here. Here's Bill, here's Audrey with their girls in front of their house, which was about a mile from Baptist High School, which you mentioned earlier as being part of your main assignment in Joss, was getting the Baptist High School up and going, founding it. Can you say a word about what the school was called? It was the Baptist High School and not the what?
What other choices do I have?
Well, I think I remember, here's another photo. It says Baptist High School. It doesn't say Baptist Boys High School.
It was traditional to have, it would have been following tradition to be Baptist Boys High School, but we knew that if you're going to have only one school there, eventually we're going to have some girls who will come, so no, we wouldn't call it Baptist Boys High School. Then we'd have to change all of our letterhead, you know. But having girls was a few years down the road. Girls didn't get education readily. All they needed to do was be able to cook and take care of children, so why send them to school? So it was a few years before we built up enough of a backlog of female students so they could come.
So it was the Baptist High School and not the Baptist Boys High School. And to me, that it's humorous, but to me, that brief story became an emblem that the Cowleys are always thinking ahead. And I found that has been true, and I think still is true in so many ways. It's one of the things I've come to love about them. Here are the Cowleys with their daughters, Carol and Karen. As the school grew, student bodies grew, staff grew. This is the inside of the chapel. You'll see more photos of it in a little while, but I wanted you to have a sense of their context. Here's an aerial view of the high school. Audrey, what are you? I have no idea. I'm not mathematically inclined. Here's a photo of you teaching.
I had a few different responsibilities, one of which was to teach math. And we had a good time. And I was talking about trigonometry at this point. So one of the greatest things that I heard while I was in teaching math was the boy said, "This is fun." So I tried to make the teaching of math and the learning of math fun.
So you were there, you founded the high school. Nigeria achieved independence from Britain in 1960. Talk about tribes and tribalism, particularly in your context at the school.
I guess from time immemorial, tribalism has been an enemy of peace in most African countries, no less so in Nigeria. And when the various colonies in Africa were made into countries, the boundaries were ordinarily set by Europeans who paid no attention to cultural things or ethnic divisions. They just put people together. And it wasn't always a happy marriage. And we knew that in the country of Nigeria, for example, at least 200 tribes, maybe more. Somebody's lost count there, maybe. So we knew, too, in the area where we were living at that moment and where we would have the school, that in an immediate vicinity there would be 30 or 40 or 50 tribes, each with their own customs and each with their own friends and their own enemies. Well, we knew that this school was going to be a singular institution, and we couldn't have it destroyed in its infancy or even in its later years by tribalism. So that was one of our emphases from day one. And we set upon a verse of Scripture from Psalm 133. "Behold how good and pleasant it is for brethren to live together in unity." And we had a big sign made with that on it that the students had to pass every day wherever they went. They had to face up to that. And so, sure enough, it wasn't more than 4 or 5 years till we counted, and we had 30 different tribes represented. But we were not aware of any tribal difficulty in the school at the time that we were there, and we have not heard of any later, these 50-some years later, that has never been a problem in the school.
So several years after the school has been in operation, in 1966, there is a military coup in Nigeria. And tribal tension comes again to the fore, but as missionaries and as educators at the Baptist High School, you are not supposed to have an opinion about the coup, correct?
Well, coups were a dime a dozen. We had, we've lost count. We know we were there during at least 7 or 8 coups, some bloody coups, some quiet coups, but anyway, we had friends who were so kind, and they would just give us a quiet warning, lay low for a few days. And we would lie low, and then they would come back and say, well, tomorrow everything's going to be all right. You can circulate again. And so that's the way we lived life. But no, we weren't there to take sides, so to speak. And to do so would have been foolish for a number of reasons, one of which we might have been picked off. And we wanted to stay around a while.
So when the coup happens in January of '66, y'all are in Nigeria, family's back in the States. This is Cornell Gerner, who was the Secretary for Africa, Europe, and the Near East of the Foreign Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. He gets word back in Richmond that missionaries are safe after the coup. He writes letters to missionary families, assuring the families of the safety of their loved ones. This was a letter we found, I don't think it's in the actual documentary, but it's from your mother, and she's thanking Gerner for the notices that he's sending and the letters that he's sending, letting her know that y'all are safe. She sends another one in June. And about halfway down, she's relaying information that you, Bill, have sent in a letter to her. And it has to do with the fact that y'all are a little on edge about the fact that you have some faculty and some students at the high school. The coup has happened. There's going to be another coup or a counter coup, or some people say it's a mutiny. But nevertheless, there is still tribal tension in the country, and you're writing your mother, your folks, giving some hints about it. Explain to people the stakes that you were feeling personally at the Baptist High School with regard to Igbos and Easterners who were starting to be targeted.
Yes, the trouble didn't bubble up overnight. We heard rumors for weeks before something really serious happened, and then we had these various coups, none of which gave you a peaceable feeling. But here was quickly the situation as we saw it. When European nations came to Nigeria, initially to find what raw materials there were there, what natural resources there were there that could be useful. And so they began to make the acquaintance of peoples on the coast. And among those, a very prominent group were the Igbo people, mostly located in the southeastern part of the country. The Igbo people were known for being very quick to catch on to new ideas. They quickly adapted to Western education and took advantage of that and began to get the jobs that were being offered and which required a certain amount of training. So pretty soon in that part of the country, they were at the top of the heap, so to speak. And then they, carrying their education and training with them, migrated right on up through the country into the northern part of the country. Now, when they crossed a couple of rivers, they were in northern territories. When we first went to Nigeria, our passports were stamped that we may not go into northern territories with any idea of spreading the gospel. We could go there as tourists and visit, but there must be no indication that we were trying to start anything of an evangelical nature. So when the Igbos, with their education and quick ways of learning and doing things, got into the north, they began to take jobs. Northern peoples at that time were not so much interested in the education or the jobs. And so they preferred a quieter type of life. They were almost 100% Muslim. The Igbos were very high percent Christian, Roman Catholic particularly. So the Igbos were all up through the north and in prominent positions. Now, personally, we think things might have been quieter for a longer period of time, except for one thing, and this is maybe not a good thing to do to generalize too much, but Igbo peoples were very proud of what they were able to do, and they didn't keep a secret about that. And so they began to brag about places they had and what they were able to do, and the northern people became increasingly restive and resentful of this. And so then there began to be just an episode here, an incident here, and then they began to multiply and spread. And so pretty soon you had a great deal of enmity between northern peoples and eastern peoples.
And you have some of the Eastern peoples at your school, both in terms of students and faculty.
Right.
Talk about this photograph here and who of particular interest is in it.
Okay, this picture was probably made during the first year of the school, because we had, that would be about how many students we had in the first year, because we added a new class each year. And so here, I think you can recognize our family there somewhere. Now, in this picture, to my right, that is to the left of me, there is the young man you see. He is of Eastern origin. We think we had 3 Eastern origin students and 3 faculty members. They had gotten there just by the same process of migration. And in fact, this young man, whose name is Jonathan Ikerionwu, his parents' family had moved into the town of Bukaru, which was mentioned in the clip here, where that theological college was. And they worked in the tin mines and had been there years and years. And so we had a couple of others the same sort of route to being in the school as Jonathan was. And then we had teachers who were actually products of our mission teacher training schools down in the southern part of the country, but now we have a school in the north and we need teachers, and so we had some of them who were of Eastern origin. And remember, we're a school where it's good and pleasant to live together as brothers in unity, so there was no big problem.
You can see Jonathan in several photos. It became like finding, like, where's Waldo? As the coolies would have all these photos, and we would start looking for Jonathan. Here he is over here on the edge in this photo. Here he is right here in the lineup wearing his school uniform. In June, Gerner takes a trip to Africa, and he visits missionaries in various countries. And this is a couple of pages from Gerner's journal that he kept, the Secretary for Africa. And on these couple of pages here, he's in Jos, and he stays with you all. And actually, you can see him reference going to the coolies, Bill and Audrey, Carol, age 10, Karen, age 8. Here's Karen, age 8, right out here. You're reading it, it's kind of like, I guess what would now be an Instagram or a Twitter feed. It's like, here's what I had for breakfast, here's who I stayed with, here's their kids, and all these things. Well, it's in here. And so Gerner's with you over the summer as tension keeps mounting. He goes back to the States. I found another letter. Here you are writing to Gerner, who's back in the States now. You're talking about something else on a deadline. You mentioned September 15th, 1966. That's 50 years ago today. But you close your letter, work here is progressing normally, although there is still considerable unrest in the country. And then in late September, the phone rings. So think back to the clip that began our time here today. It has started. The phone rings, the killing begins. You start thinking of what you're going to do, including Jonathan. Do you want to say anything else about how you sort of processed, either practically or spiritually, what happened when you got the phone call? I know you said that the phone only rang when there was bad news.
Well, the phone almost never rang because we had a phone in the house where we were living, I think, almost all the time we were in Nigeria, but we only recall it ever working more than a month. And so this happened to be that month, and that was probably the only phone call we had that whole month, is that one at night that says, so, you know, when the phone rings, you're not used to it, and it's about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and it rings, you know, you really take notice. And so that was it. And of course, as you see, we'd had warning. People had been saying something's coming, and besides the fact that there was something coming, it was multiplied infinitely by rumor, all sorts of rumors. Here's what's, you know, you can expect this, that, and the other, and so it was built up in your mind, and there was always that sense of foreboding, that dread of what's coming and when's it coming. And we were well aware that we had Eastern students and teachers. We were well aware that we were totally surrounded by Northern peoples. We also knew that the Northern peoples had very carefully identified the location of every Easterner anywhere, and knew where they were at and where they would be at the time they would need to know that location. So we were aware of all of this, and as I think the clip indicates here, we didn't really sleep much the rest of the night because we were thinking what to do, what's the best thing to do, what options do we have. There was never the thought that we would do nothing. There was never the thought that we would barricade ourselves and leave our students and teachers just to the whim of the rioters, but that's the situation. Now, shall I tell something of the plans we made?
Sure.
Well, Audrey's already told you that we brought those 6 people over to where we were living, and we did have a small house that was not occupied at the moment, and we knew that all the neighbors knew that it was not occupied. So we quickly brought our people in and just pretended there was nobody there. Now, of course, our gardener, Garba, whose picture you saw, had to know. And he was a firm, staunch Northerner and a fierce Muslim. He's calling me. No. So we first had to face that. What will he do? Will he go and call all of his Northern friends and come, and we'll just have the bloodbath right here in our front yard? So I had to confront him immediately and work out something with him. There was no point in our trying to protect people who were already betrayed. So I just asked him, what will your position be? I had to remind him at the point, though, that at the time of the birth of each of his children, they were at the hospital, and all of the nurses were Igbos, And could he remember that? But anyway, as the clip said, he went off to think about it and then came back and gave his answer. And it's very true. I knew him to be such a man of honor that he would not go back on his word. So once we had that settled, then we were pretty free to make other plans. Now we began to get the rumors that X days or weeks down the road, there would be plans for evacuating those people who were Easterners who were still left there after the pogrom. And so we were confident that our people would still be alive at that time. And so we needed to make plans for what to do. And so then the rumors focused, and they said there would be planes that would come in a certain day, and if you have your people there, they can be on the plane and go to safety, hopefully. So now we have to think how to get our people across about 10 miles, 5 miles of that through the city itself, because the airport was exactly directly across the city from where we were. So no way to get there. So we made a plan. We had an old VW bus that was well known in the community. So I began to drive that bus back and forth between the school and the airport, day and night. There were a total of maybe 8 or 10 possible points where there would be police or military inspection points, or where there would be traffic stops or whatever. And so I began to go through all of those, as I said, all hours of the day and night. I wanted anybody who was ever going to be posted at one of those positions to be so well acquainted with this vehicle that they would just say, come on through. So that was the practice. And for days, that's what I did. And so I made friends with all of those soldiers and all of those policemen, and they began, you know, just saying, oh, we know you, go on through. So then we knew that we were pretty well assured of being able to get our people there. So we made our plan to put them in this old VW bus. I think we took the center seat out because we were going to put them seated on the floor, and then we surrounded them with ourselves, the missionaries, and in the back window of the bus, our children looking out, waving and smiling. And so we loaded our people up. We drove those 10 miles through the city. We passed all the inspection points. Come on through. And we went to the airport for the longest day of my life.
I think y'all said that Audrey knitted the world's longest scarf on that day while you were waiting at the
I had
airport.
to do something with my hands. But when we got them on when the plane came, the crowd rushed out and left our 6 behind. So they didn't get on the plane that came, but that plane left Jos and went to Kano.
Going north.
Going north to Kano. And we learned later that all of the Igbos on that plane were killed as they left the plane. So it was of the Lord that our 6 didn't get on that plane. But then that plane came back, and at that point, it was dark, and there were no lights, because the ones who controlled that sort of thing were Igbos, and they were not working that day. But what we did was line up cars with their headlights on either side of the landing strip, and they lit up the landing strip with their headlights, and the plane came in, and our 6, among others, went to get on. And they took off, and we didn't hear anything from them for many years.
It was also during this time that we found this letter that you, Audrey, wrote. And I remember finding it in the archives and coming back and asking y'all questions. And y'all said, gee whiz, you have to be careful what you write down because 50 years later, someone may want to come back and talk about it. But here it is. And you're asking Dr. Gerner and the mission for more help in trying to airlift more Igbos and Easterners out. Jonathan, who is part of the group that is evacuated, survives, and one of the funnest things I've ever done was be part of the reunion of Jonathan with the Coolies that took place here at Sanford at the Global Center. Sanford, the Global Center, Beeson, everybody just rolled out the red carpet. And this is Jonathan here and the Coolies, and they're seeing each other for the first time in more than 40 years. And it was so much fun. And this photo I took just outside, and as I look at it, each of you just has a youthful glow about you. And I don't say that and mean to imply that a youthful glow is better than an elderly glow. Because I think each has its own glow. But what I really mean is that in some senses, it felt like we were trying to construct a time machine and to go back 50 years and figure out what had happened. And it involves fragments of memory, diary, journal, correspondence, newspapers. But when I look at this, I mean, Jonathan looks like a schoolboy, and it's, what was it like? Was that reunion surprising in some, were the feelings or emotions about this surprising in some way?
Well, actually, let me go back to Nigeria. We sent them off on the plane and never heard any word from any of the 6 until one day Bill was leading a time of prayer and Bible study in the chapel. He did that every morning. And somebody came in the back door. Now, there were glass windows in the chapel, and the sun was shining through those glass windows, and he couldn't see who it was until he got up very close, and it was Jonathan. First sight of him since the plane took him away.
And this is the inside of the chapel then and now at Baptist High School.
Oh, uh-huh.
And the outside of the chapel now and then. And you can see the glass panes that she's talking about that are still there that would create this backlighting effect.
Uh-huh.
Well, and here's a place where I need to have you as my witnesses. I have a case against Cliff because he agreed that his makeup person would make me look young. And he totally failed. Now he's trying to make up for it. So in this picture, they look young. Carry on, Cliff.
Well, I'm gonna do you one better because this is the grounds of the Baptist High School, and here's a building, and there's a plaque that says this is the Cooley Building at Baptist High School. So I guess we won't want to leave a few time for questions, but I love this photograph. We've put it on promotional materials and in the DVD. I guess, do you have final thoughts about what does it feel like reliving in some ways a traumatic experience? You know, we found maybe some of the lighter sides of it, but certainly the story has a lot darker elements to it as well. Final thoughts?
I think something that will certainly come out in the full-length film when you see that. This episode, this particular event in history was kept very quiet. Nobody wanted to talk about it. We didn't want to talk about a very painful experience. When we came home, little hints, nobody wanted to hear about it really. It was something long ago and far away. And it being in Black Africa, it didn't get any headlines here. It would get 3 lines on page 12, and that would be it. So it was just not the thing. We had also the business of whether or not there would be a certain amount of blowback, and in Nigeria that to remind people of this or relive this in any sense might have repercussions. There might be somebody would interpret that we were taking sides in this, so we didn't want that, so it just was not talked about. And so that's why 50 years has passed and you're just now hearing about this.
To reiterate what Bill said, I'll read a snippet from an email I got from Carrie Robison. She's in the documentary. She was an Assemblies of God missionary child. So she was 16 when this happened, and she has her own experience about ministering to Igbos. And now that we're starting to have screenings, she just wants to know, how are things going? How many people were there? And she was one that didn't really want to talk first, and we don't twist people's arms, but we'll ask them if they want to talk. Most people, when asked, said yes. A few said no and stuck to that. A few said no and then said, yeah, I think I would. She was in the latter category. She first said no, and then she said, yeah, I think I would. She wrote this to me a week ago. She said, I must admit that in the quiet place of my heart, I still carry the fear or certainty, ? That no one will really care or have the time or energy to care about what happened. Life is complicated these days, and I understand it will be difficult for most people to overcome the distance of 50 years and really engage with our story. After all, in the Insta life we lead these days, where we tend to value most what happened an hour ago, events of 5 years ago are barely a clear memory, let alone 50 years ago, right? But in the end, it is finally told, isn't it? And she sends me stuff like that. And so there's a significant portion of the documentary that just talks about and explores why people didn't talk about it, and y'all have comments to say about that, as well as others like Carrie.
I think you all would like to know that there is here today a graduate of Baptist High School, Jos. If that person would stand up. This is Mr. Richard Ishaku. He has lived in Birmingham 20-some years, and so we didn't know he was here for years and years. And he said, am I the only one? It reminds me of a very funny episode. A number of years ago, Audrey and I were to be given a plaque by the Consul General of Nigeria, who was based in Atlanta, and he was coming over here. So we were meeting at one of the churches, and Richard was to introduce Audrey and me. Now, when it came in time for Richard to do that, he thought it would be a very clever thing, which it was, to sing the school song. So he got up and started singing the school song, and then we heard back in the back somebody else singing the school song. So we found out that there was a lady back there, a lawyer from Nigeria, who had been sent here to study legislation having to do with handicapped people, and she had spent a number of months in Jos. So you're the only one here today, Richard, but and we have 2 Nigeria Baptist MKs here today, so let's have them stand. You know who you are, I think. This, of course, is our daughter Karen. This is Ann Lucas, who is one of the mainsprings of E3 Ministries, and they recruit lots of people who go on lots of mission trips each year, and she'll probably be talking to some of you.
She's good at arm twisting.
I've learned that when someone pulls out a photo of Baptist High School and the students, and I'll say, yeah, who's this? I'm not kidding. It turns into a litany of doctor, lawyer, engineer, teacher, professor, doctor, lawyer, professor, engineer, banker. The reputation of that school is reaches far and wide, and you're looking at the founders of the not the Baptist Boys High School, but the Baptist High School in Nigeria.
That we took our first group of students through for their examinations. They sit for external examinations in Nigeria. And we, of course, didn't know how our people would do. This was a new school, just getting started. We didn't, think maybe they would do anything. It turned out that they had over 96% pass rate, most of that in upper level. And so I wondered recently how well had they done till today. So I got in touch with the principal of the school out there. He sent me a printout of examination results for the last 5 or 10 years, and it's almost 100% in every subject, everything. And we know too from other sources that they are also maintaining that spirit of brotherhood and that spirit of Christian faith that they have had all these years.
A few minutes for some questions.
Repeat the question for the people.
All right, this lady asks, how did we go about getting land for the school? And it was a complicated process because in Nigeria, there is no such thing as a personal landholder or individual landholder. That is, the land belongs to the tribe. And so to get property was difficult. Now, Audrey mentioned First Baptist Church in Jos, which was largely a church of Westerners, and those mostly Protestant, and in this case Baptists, very strong there. And so they had been wanting to have a school, and they had staked out some land that they thought would be good land, and so they, quote, gave us that land. But as it turned out, it was sort of a strange gift, because the surveyor that they had employed was totally incompetent. He sighted a base point that was about 100 yards off of the base point that it should have been, and each of his angles was about 4 or 5 degrees off. So we were building on a land that we thought was ours, but when we got the true survey, we were building about 100 yards outside of the property. So I had to quick go to the district officer, a British man, and I say, look, we're in trouble. And he says, keep your mouth shut and we'll get it worked out. So he did. He went to bat for us, and we got then the property we wanted, and it was a better property than the one before anyway. So I don't know if this answers your question or not, but it was a long, slow, hard process. She's asking how many people were killed during this time we're talking about. We calculated that in our city and the town of Bukaru that was mentioned at 10 miles down the road, that there were at least 10,000 killed during that brief, maybe 1 week or maybe even a little less than a week. And I think somewhere didn't we see, Cliff, that they reckoned 40 or 50,000 total were killed.
Also was the north than the south.
Yes. Well, she's asking how it was possible to have a Christian school in a Muslim part of the country. And that, again, was a ticklish situation. Now, there was a strong Baptist element in Jos who was neither northern nor eastern, which I think was part of it. Jos itself is known, well, the whole area is called the Pagan Plateau. It was neither Muslim nor Christian. It was the meeting point, and that's why, in fact, this particular episode happened in Jos, because it was that meeting point where the different peoples came into clash with one another. So that was it. Then the fact that independence was coming, and they wanted very much to have schools, and secondary schools particular were very short supply. So that and the different people who had government offices and such just worked and worked and worked and got it.
One more question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just following up with a question these things as well.
Yes, she's asking whether we had Muslim students, and the answer is yes, we did.
When they started school.
But I think we didn't have 100% of those who eventually became Christian, but we had a very high percentage who did. And those students were trained, I mean, not the Muslim ones, but the overall students were trained, and they themselves would go out into the villages on the weekends, and in the first 7 years of the school, they started 7 churches, which is very biblical, you know, all the sevens.
I really hate to end this. This
Well,
has been
I have one thing I must
fantastic.
do.
I would not end this as long as he would say anything more.
On occasions like this, it's always customary to have a gift. And so this gift is for Cliff, who has done so much to bring this particular part of the Nigeria story to light. And so, Cliff. You better open it.
It must be from Walgreens.
It was on sale.
Thank you, Bill.
Over to you now.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you so much for coming. They do have documentaries on sale right outside of here, and I hope to see you again. Again, please give them a hand. You're dismissed.
Thank you all so much.